Hello, everyone. Welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training. I'm Richard Carlton, creator of FMTraining.tv, where every day is an exciting day to learn about the Claris FileMaker platform. And so we're going to momentarily dive into some amazing topics. The next 2 days are going to be quite amazing. Today, we got Wim Decorte regarding the MCP server. Now, let me frame this up a little bit for everyone here. So Wim is a chief technology guy, basically one of the boss people at Soliant. I've known Wim on and off for quite a number of years, one of the sharpest people in the world in terms of the Claris FileMaker platform. In fact, he's so sharp that he is, well, let's just say loosely, working closely with Claris to help them understand the needs of what's going on, at least on the server side of things. So we're really excited to have him here. MCP Server is a new capability, a new feature. And it's important for us to understand where this goes. We haven't been doing a lot of AI conversation the last month or so. The AI stuff continues to be fairly propeller head. It's what Claris, I don't necessarily directly intended it to be this way, but it's really advanced. But it's important, even if you're not going to build this immediately, to get your head wrapped around the concepts. And the MCP server concept is important to understand because basically it's essential. It's an essential thing that we're going to have to play with in the future. And we're going to let Wim discuss that, how it came to be and what it is and why is it important, why we should care, right? So Wim, welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad you are here.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Cool. So I don't know where you want to start with this conversation, but I always tell people, who are you and why should we care, right? So
You gave a good introduction, right? So my name is Wim Decorte. I'm the CTO at Soliant, and I work very closely with, as Richard said, with Claris to basically help them think through some of the things, the vision for the product, and where to go. And needless to say, a lot of conversations around AI and the need for AI. And I think it's fair to say that many of you listening here, and Richard and I and Margaret were talking about this ahead of time. We see this everywhere. Like people are interested in AI, no doubt. There is a hunger for learning about AI, but then when you set out to begin to think about implementing AI, it's not as simple as it seems, right? It's um, maybe well, the technical implementation is one thing, but also coming up with use cases for AI. If I think about like two big buckets of use cases, there's the coding, the vibe coding that took off. Like everybody and their dog are doing vibe coding, right? Like
Yes, that's
that's something.
extremely popular. Yeah.
It is, right? I'm doing a lot of it. I'm trying to see where the limits are with doing that. Like at what point does it stop to be useful and does it deliver on the promise? But inside FileMaker, we can't use vibe coding. Like there's no vibe coding to be done with the FileMaker platform. So there's really only the second bucket, and that those are the business use cases for AI, right? Like what is it? Because we all do it. We all build business workflows to solve a problem. Like where do we inject AI in that? Like what's the place that AI could take up for doing that? And that's where a lot of people struggle with, right? Like it's you have the classic ones like I want to build a dashboard, and very often when people come to that, I'm going like, are you sure you want AI for that? Right? Like if I want to know how many open invoices I have when I log in the morning, that's not AI, right? That's just a query against my database to get the number of open invoices, right? So people tend to get stuck with that. Like I'm going like it feels like I should be doing some with AI, but what, right? Like it's and this is not a Claris or FileMaker problem. We see this industry wide, right? Like even on the AWS side, on the Salesforce side, even we do a lot of demos using vibe coded web apps, right?
Hmm.
And people struggle to come up with good business cases for where to fit it in. And there are a few. Well, they'll come to fruition as people understand more how to do it and where to put it in. But um,
Yeah,
it's a struggle.
I find either in my observations that people have AI in everything suddenly, all of a sudden it is too much, or they cannot find a spot to stick it, so there's like nothing at all.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
there's this back and forth.
Yep. And I'll mention it in my presentation. That sometimes leads to sort of like fear of missing out, right? Like we're going like I feel like I should be doing something with
Hmm.
AI, right? But I don't know where, I don't know how, and that creates some angst as to okay, what's going on? So
yeah, you don't want to force it, right? You don't want to force it. So it has to be a good fit. You need to think about that logically. So cool. All right, good, good, good.
All right, let's dive in.
Yeah, this is huge. By the way, this is huge right here. This concept, Margaret and I discovered this concept. People say it, but it hadn't internalized in our heads until about what 3 or 4 weeks ago, and
Oh,
and we're
yeah.
and we're like, oh, it doesn't know
Yep.
anything.
Yep.
So
And this is what this presentation is going to be about, right? So we'll talk about MCP, but we'll also talk fundamentally, because this is true, as you have discovered, it is true, right? And if you don't know why it matters, or even why that is, and how you can make it not so, then you're in the right place. This is what today and tomorrow will be about, right? But it's fundamental that we grasp this concept, this notion, and then know how to move away from this, right? And
Hmm.
this is what I'll deliver today is largely a modified version of the Engage Europe, Engage You presentation I've done in Antwerp in November, which is a great conference, by the way. If you want to go to a conference, and we know that there's not going to be a Claris DEF CON FileMaker Engage this year, so consider going to this one. It's a great one, right? So I'm going to repeat it one more time. And when you talk to an AI model, ChatGPT, Claude Code, or Claude, whatever, right? Like you're talking to a model, and we'll explain what talking to a model means, but it doesn't know anything about your solution. And I'll drive that point home as we go through that. Um, and I believe, and this is my promise for the next 2 days, is that by the end of the next 2 days, you'll feel better armed with the fundamentals of MCP, why it matters, and how it all works. Um, so today we will cover the basics, and I want to stress that today is not theoretical, right? Let's call it foundational. And I urge
Hmm.
anybody here to not skip over today's session to go like, well, if we're just going to talk theory, it's so important to get the notions and the foundations, the concepts, to truly understand those, right? Because with the information from today, if you don't have that information, if you skip it, you'll run into a wall, and you will not understand why that happens. And I know that it's true because that's what happened to me, right? Like most things, I dive into technology. I'm going like, I don't need to understand the concepts. They'll become clear as I do it. AI is different, right? If you don't understand the concepts, you will get lost fundamentally, right?
Yes.
So, um, and because it's all new, right? It's a whole different vocabulary. It's a whole different way of thinking for some things. These are not just evolutions of things we knew from the past. This is totally new, right? So we got to get the foundations right.
Hmm.
All right. So when you have AI assisted workflows, or you set out to build them, um, the it looks something like that, and I'll get into the details for this. But at some point, you will want to be able to connect that to your FileMaker solution, right? And I don't mean just the data, although the data clearly is important, right? But you will also want to be reusing some of the business logic that you have in your scripts, right? Your layouts, your scripts. That is the encapsulation of the business logic, what your client has told you how it should look, how it should flow from A to B,
Hmm.
and in the background, we're collecting data and we're manipulating data, but we want to expose both of those to an AI application, right? And I'll explain more about that a little later. So it's not just about accessing your data. So how do we go about that, right? How do we give an AI application access to our solution? And to be clear, we are talking about workflows that do not originate from inside FileMaker. And with workflows, I mean these new AI-assisted workflows, right? Because clearly, if you're inside FileMaker, you already have access to the scripts and all the data, right? So that's not what we're talking about. So we're not talking about these AI script steps inside FileMaker. We'll come back to those probably more tomorrow than today. But we're talking about something that happens from the outside of FileMaker, right? So like this is sort of like the schematic of something we all know, which is a chat application, meaning there's a
Hmm.
chat interaction, you type some stuff, you send it off, and the AI application comes back with a response, right? So that's what most of us are used to, like ChatGPT, Claude, these kinds of things, right? Um,
Yes.
so how do we go? How do we go and do that, right? And I want to I want to emphasize that the problem isn't limited to FileMaker solutions, right? AI applications need to access any number of systems that you may have or that your client may have, right? And very often multiple systems at the same time. I'll show you, if we don't get to it today, then certainly tomorrow, something that I'm working on for a client where we need to get access the data from Apple School Manager and Jamf. This is about tracking devices, right? So we want to be able to access data that is inside FileMaker, Jamf, and Apple School Manager at the same time, right? Because there's overlap between the data, so we want to be able to read from all three systems at the same time.
So it would
Uh,
need to understand the logic from all three systems and also the logic of how they interact with each other, correct?
Yep,
Okay.
exactly. And so to frame it a little bit better for what we're thinking about today, think about, say, a FileMaker solution that you build.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to have access to these external systems, maybe ServiceNow for tickets about devices, Jam for what devices you have, Apple School Manager or a staff database for the people and that you have, maybe some buildings, like if you have a computer lab, something like that, right? So there's data in different silos, if you will, and they all these days they all have their API. So from inside FileMaker, we would know how to talk to these systems, right? If they have an API,
Mm-hmm.
we can talk to them. Whether we use Connect for the ease of use, or we write our own API scripts. So from an AI application, it's pretty much the same thing, right? If I'm sitting there chatting and I'm asking questions like, how many devices do I have that are out of compliance? That is a natural language query.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fairly simple one, right? So I could probably translate that into a FileMaker script that would go do the find and come up with these things, right? It would be a little more different if I say, how many devices do I have that are out of compliance, and present them to me in a pie chart with these colors, right? Like we know that AI should be possible, should be able to do that. In FileMaker, I would be able to do some of that, but I would have to hard code a ton of stuff, right? Like it wouldn't be as, and it's a very simplistic example that I'm giving, but you sort of like get the drift where you give a lot of instructions to the AI application and it goes off and does it, or you hope it goes off and does it correctly, right? We'll come back to that as well. So if we make the analogy to building AI integrations from inside FileMaker, we understand APIs, and most of us do APIs all day, every day these days. But it's not that different from an AI application, right? So I can have an AI application and basically make it do API calls to FileMaker, right? FileMaker has APIs, OData API, Data API, ODBC, JDBC. If we want to, those are APIs as well. So we could do that from inside an AI application. But we would have to do that in the code base for that AI application, right? Like, for instance, ChatGPT has a way to do that, and they call it plugins. And Claude has something, and they call it tools.
Okay.
Copilot, Microsoft has something called extensions to do that, right? But they each have their own opinion on how to do it, and they each have their proprietary way of doing that.
Okay,
But
so if you learn one AI, you can only learn one way of accessing the API essentially for that one AI, which kind of makes it a
a
little
pain,
rough. Yeah.
yep. A pain, because there's some vendor lock-in going, right? Like it's one of the things that if you start off your journey with ChatGPT and then the company goes to Microsoft 365, so you get Copilot as part of the bargain, you would have to redo a bunch of your code, right? So you'd have to learn how Copilot does it and whatnot. So fundamentally, and we're jumping ahead a little bit, but fundamentally, that is what MCP solves, right? MCP is what happens when a lot of these people, like the Anthropic and OpenAI, they get together and go like, oh, let's not be stupid, right? Let's not each do our own proprietary thing, and let's come up with a standard way of doing these things, right? So,
Okay.
and in a nutshell, that's what MCP does.
Okay, so MCP is a rule set essentially for how AIs will interact with APIs.
Yep, but pretty much. That's not a bad way to summarize that. Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. We were talking about this before the today's session started, right? So within the developer community, and not just Claris FileMaker community, right? But any developer community that we see on the Salesforce side, on the AWS side, on the native web app side as well, both from developers and from clients, there is that sense that they should be doing something with AI, but they're feeling kind of stuck, right? On the developer side, there's a lot of learning to be done. On the client side, it's like, okay, where should I be using AI? Like, what are my use cases to do that for? So there's that, and how we, in today's session, tomorrow's session, how we can help with that is to help demystify what it all means, right? So if you can cut through the smoke, right? If we can cut through the smoke and mirrors about a lot of these things, it'll become clearer to you where you can or should be using that. So we'll try to do that as well. So we will explain how it works, but we will also spend some time on the things that really matter, right? Like, what is it that you need to know to make these AI applications that you're going to write, or the AI applications that you're going to adopt and then hook them up to your FileMaker solution? What is it that will make it a success, or what is it that can lead it to failure, right? So we're going to spend some time on that.
Also good to know.
Absolutely. Because those are the walls that I've been bouncing off of. All right, so model context protocol. Before we dive into that, right? So this is still early in today's presentation. For all of you there in the audience, email us your questions. What is it that you want to see tomorrow, right? Like, today we will cover a lot of the foundations. What is it? What does it mean? Why should I care? And what are the things to watch out for, in a nutshell? Tomorrow we want to get a little more practical, right? So this is your chance to reach out to us. So you can put it in the various platforms that Margaret has going on there. Like, tell me what you want to see tomorrow, and I'll see how much of that I can pull into tomorrow's session. So with that being said, model context protocol, right? MCP. First word is model. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but again, we're talking about all the foundational stuff that is really, really important. So what is a model? I've shown this diagram. This is an AI application. It's the one that we all know. It's a chat application, right? So chat input, something happens. The AI application is talking to a model. That's what the text generation model thing that hangs off the bottom left means there, right? So the model is probably in this thing, the single most important thing, right? Because it is the model that will generate the response, right? Whatever I ask will flow through this AI application. The AI application is really nothing more than some code that knows how to take your input, send it to the AI model, and then interpret the response and format it in a way that you can understand, that you can read, right? If it's like a web web interface like ChatGPT, then the AI application is just the HTML, the JavaScript that makes that whole flow going, right? It's really the interaction with the model that makes it valuable, right? Because it's the model that generates the response.
Yeah, and I assume like picking whatever model you're going to use is like one of the biggest things you can do to determine the success or failure of an AI application.
Absolutely, right? So models, we touched a lot of that in the week-long thing that both Todd and I did last year, right? So picking the right model, size, dimensions, parameters, all of that stuff comes into play, right? Speed as well, by the way, is one of the factors that goes in there, right? So when I say AI application, I mean this section, right? So the thing that will receive your inputs, knows how to do that interaction with the AI model, the large language model or LLM, and get you the response back. So that's what I mean with AI application, right? The AI model is not technically part of your AI application because the AI model is hosted on its own server, because AI models require a different set of hardware specifications, lots of GPUs, lots of high-end compute power. So they run on their own thing. Your AI application runs wherever you want to run it, really, because that's not very heavyweight. But you need an AI model server somewhere. You can host your own. Claris has an AI model server, or you can use the OpenAI one, right? The third-party commercial providers. You can set up your own in AWS with Bedrock. I have a Mac Studio here. that I'm running my own with LM Studio or Olama, right? So these are all AI model servers.
Hmm.
And we will expand that to include this part, right? The MCP server. So that's really the part that is newish that we're going to spend some time on and talk about, right? So it's the MCP server that is hooked up or knows how to talk to your FileMaker server, right? It's not the AI application that knows how to talk to your FileMaker, right? So you, again, I'm going to repeat that. If you had full control over the AI application, whether you write it yourself or you use something like ChatGPT and you use whatever tools or Copilot or Claude and you use the tools that they have, you could hook it up directly to your FileMaker server, right? You don't have to go to an MCP server. It's just very, very easy if you go to an MCP server because you can do multiple things with your MCP server. You could hook up ServiceNow or your Confluence, like your Jira, these kinds of things, right? ServiceNow, I mentioned that. So there's a bunch of stuff that you can hang off of your MCP server. That means you have to not modify or not bother to write code at the AI application level, right? So that's why we have an MCP server.
Okay. Quick, this is going to be kind of, it's like, is it hosted? Why is it called server specifically?
Yeah, because the um, because the I don't know how many that are listening in today or watching us today were part of what or listening to the week-long thing that we did way back when. Fundamentally, see if I can go back. This part, right?
Hmm.
The how an AI application talks to an AI model server is just through an HTTP URL, right?
Yes.
That's how AI model servers are exposed. MCP servers are no different. It's just another URL for the AI application to call.
Oh, okay.
And that'll actually become clear in a bit because I think I do have some examples, some practical. So they basically just get exposed as a URL and they know how to talk to each other. So for that reason, it's a server, right? It's something that can listen to a particular port and will reply. If you send it the right instructions, it will send you back an expected response.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool. Because I keep hearing about it like MCP being like this list of rules. I'm like, okay, well then why is it called server specifically? That makes sense.
Yep. Yep. It's because MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, just like HTTP stands
Hmm.
for Hypertext Transport Protocol, right? So the protocol
Yeah.
part is just a set of rules, like it's a standard. Like there's no mystery to how you can call an MCP server. You don't even need to know whether it's the Claris MCP server or one I write or somebody else provides. They will all listen to the same standard. They will all follow the same standard for this is how you can find me. This is how you construct a URL. And when you want to talk to me, you got to send me exactly this bit of JSON. Otherwise, I don't know what to do with it.
Got it. Okay. It is becoming increasingly clear. Thank you.
Yep. So in essence, we have these three different parts, right? To this whole setup, right? Our an AI application, whether you use one that exists or you write your own, doesn't really matter. Then you have to have an AI model server. That's where the big bad beast lives. And then you have to have an MCP server. So three different things. And most typically, they will all three be in different places, hosted by different things. I've been using that chat application as sort of like the guiding light there, but it doesn't need to be, right? Like the inputs, the thing on the left-hand side that, but with a chat application, it's typically something that you type in, but the input couldn't be anything, right? So this is an actual part of something that we built for at Soliant, where the trigger is just an incoming email. And then we use an AI application that does sentiment analysis. So it has its own sentiment analysis model to figure out, is somebody complaining? Is somebody happy? Right? Like we interpret what the tone of the email is. If it's a negative, then we feed it to another AI application that has a text generation model that can basically automatically send a response to the like a friendly formatted response to say we received it. We're so sorry that you're in a bad mood, right? That kind of thing. And then we do something on the Slack channel to say somebody needs to pay attention to this email, right? Because this client is not very happy. Um, And we can call an MCP server to say, we need to know how many orders this client placed in the last 12 months, because that may dictate if we have 5 complaints, which one should we handle first, right? Like the best customer will handle first, that kind of thing, right? So this is a more complex AI application or AI assisted workflow than just a chat application, but in essence, it's the same thing. Right, not going to spend too much time on that, because for that we can go back to those recordings of what we've done before. Clearly, the model is a crucial part of this, right? That's can take your input, do a bunch of stuff based on what you feed it, and then in essence spit out an output, right? Whether the output is a text or an image doesn't really matter. If you've never seen a model, you can go and download a model, and this is exactly what it looks like, right? It's a bunch of files. Some of them are big files. It's a set of files, and then instructions on how to use that file, right? So I'm actually not going to jump into any of this, because I think we covered that really well, Margaret, in what we've done last year, right? So
I
people
would
can.
agree. Yes. So,
But it's kind of crucial that if you really don't understand what a model is and how a model works, go back to those recordings, because we spend a lot of time on those.
yes.
And this speaks a little bit to what you were asking about earlier, Margaret. Right, like an AI model server, that's just an HTTPS call, right? Whether it's your own one or OpenAI, doesn't really matter. That's how you talk to an AI model server. And we have all of these recordings that you can go back to, right?
Yes, which are some of my favorite recordings on how AI works. So I highly
Nice,
recommend
thanks.
going watch them.
Thanks. So now we come to that crucial point that was on the very first slide. Like models are dumb. They're dumb in the sense that they don't know anything about your solution, right? So why is that? So this is a screenshot of a locally hosted AI application. You can sort of see it at the bottom here. It's LibreChat, which is an open source, fully blown AI application. It's just like ChatGPT. It runs in the browser, right? So the experience is very much the same. You can see here I'm using an open source GPT, OpenAI model, 20 billion parameter one, runs on my Mac Studio over here. So this is all local. Doesn't really matter whether it's local or not. But if you ask, even ChatGPT, if you ask this kind of question, when is your knowledge cutoff date? It'll come back with a date, right? That means that anything that happened after that date, the model doesn't know about. I'll let that sink in a little bit, right? Because models are trained on data up to a particular point, then the model gets released. So models are static. They only know stuff up to a particular point in time.
My
That's, yeah,
I just my favorite example of this that I think you've used before is you can't ask a model what the weather is. I cannot tell you
yeah,
the temperature of where you're at.
yep, exactly. Right. So the other thing is that models are, unless you pick a pre-trained model that is very specialized, and they exist, like for financial services, for in the medical space. But if you ask the model, it'll tell you that it's trained on general data. But what's more important is this, right? It cannot answer any real-time questions. And to your point, like if you ask it, "What's the weather today?" The model doesn't know. If you ask ChatGPT that, you'll actually get an answer that is correct. But that doesn't come from the model. That comes from the fact that ChatGPT under the hood has a set of tools that it can call to basically call a weather API and figure out where you are based on your IP and bring back the weather. That's not the model, right? That's just the AI application being smart and having a set of tools that it can call. That's a very significant distinction, right? So that's something to be aware of. So here are my examples again, right? These are the questions that a model does not know how to answer, right? So the last question is one that is specific to your solution. If you ask ChatGPT, how many open invoices do I have? It doesn't know, because it has no way to talk to your FileMaker solution, right? So how do we solve that? The first way that you can solve that is fine-tuning a model. Which is actually a feature that you can do from inside FileMaker, right? It's not FileMaker specific. You can use other tools to fine-tune a model. But what is it that we do when you fine-tune a model? In essence, you're replacing the model with a newer version of the same model, and you basically added your own training data to the model. That's what fine-tuning a model means, in essence, right? Is this a good way to go about it? I would say no, because it's a highly specialized. I'm not saying never do it, right? Like if that's your skill set, if that's the skill set you want to acquire, by all means, knock yourself out. For 99.9% of us, and that includes me, I'm not going to touch that, right? That's not. I don't think that's the right way to add knowledge about your data to a model because of the same things, right? When you fine tune a model, which is a very intense, compute intensive process that requires high end skills, and when you're done, you basically have still the same problem, right? Because
Well,
you
it's still
tune the
time
model.
locked.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's still time boxed to when you stop training the model. Like whatever data that you fed it, that's the data that you fed it, right? If I trained it on all my open invoices of today, then tomorrow that data is stale, right? Right. So that's why fundamentally I don't think for most business applications fine tuning isn't the way out. Right. Fine tuning is good for static data. Right. Like encyclopedia, knowledge. Right. Like medical knowledge. Right. So that kind of stuff. The stuff that is static is a good way of training a model so that it's specialized in some of the things that you want to know, but not your dynamic business data. That's not what it's there for. All right. So another way that you can do that is retrieval augmented generation or RAG. Right. So you can add your data to RAG, and the Claris AI model server has RAG capabilities. Right. So there's this thing here called RAG that you can enable when you deploy the Claris AI model server. Um, and in a nutshell, what it comes down to is uh, on the right, we still have that sort of like schematic of the AI application that we have, but we're now adding a bunch of stuff to it, right? So the thing on the left is the workflow that you will need to add your data to the RAG database. Think of you have a PDF of guidelines, right?
Hmm.
Or a manual or a contract, whatever it may be. You take that PDF, you feed it to the RAG database where it gets embedded, just like for semantic search almost, right? Like or embedding a picture, it gets embedded and then stored, so that when you ask a question about it, your AI application now knows that there is this RAG database that it can go access to see if the question that you just asked can be answered from the RAG database.
Okay, so you would have to give it data though that isn't regularly updated, right? Because both the examples you used are things that generally don't get fixed very often.
Exactly, right? So the examples that I gave, like contracts, guidelines, manuals, they are fairly static. I'm not saying that the manual never changes, but it doesn't change like minute to minute, like your open invoices might, right? So for that reason, for a lot of the business questions that we want to ask to AI, RAG isn't the answer, right? It is the answer if you have a lot of static documents. But for things like open invoices and stuff like that, it's not the right way to go. Make sense?
Hmm. Makes perfect sense.
Right. So same questions, right? Like the real time stuff, like my open invoices, what's the weather, what day is it today? That's not what RAG is really good for, right? So in that sense, we can't really fundamentally solve the problem for anything that is real time data through RAG, right? Again, I'm not saying never use RAG. RAG really has its place. If you have lots of documents, unstructured data that you want to search on and say, how many contracts do I have where, I don't know, right? Where my say insurance limit is over $5 million, right? So that's a perfect question to answer to ask of a RAG database, right?
Hmm.
Because if you have all your contracts that are readily available in that RAG database, it'll tell you like these are your 25 contracts, right? So that kind of stuff, uh, but not for the real time stuff,
Hmm. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
right? So that's how we get to tool calling, right? The tool calling is at the heart of MCP. What we mean by tool calling is that we provide the AI application with a list of tools. And I just mentioned the tool. Like if you do that ChatGPT thing where you ask it the weather, it does talk to a model just to generate a response, but fundamentally it's going to call a weather API tool to figure out what that is, right? So that's fundamentally what MCP is about. You give the AI application a list of tools, you describe each tool so that it's known what the tools do, and that it's known how to provide input to the tools. Like if it's a weather API, I got to give it something like a zip code, right? Or a city and state or something like that, something that it knows to then look up the weather for. So there's going to be some input parameters that we need to specify. And also, hopefully, the tool will be described in such a way that the AI application can interpret the response that comes from that. So it knows how to parse it and that it knows how to visualize it, right? So if it's a tool that brings back data that is best shown in a pie chart, then the tool should say that, right? To say you can expect data in this format, and by the way, the best way to visualize that is through a pie chart. So that's what tools do, right? It's something that the AI application is aware of, and then can use and call. And we mentioned this, right? So you could just from the AI application write your own API integration straight into FileMaker because FileMaker has APIs, right? So no mystery to how that works. But we don't want that tightly coupled stuff. We want something that is abstract and that isn't, well, that is the same no matter what AI application that you use. If I want to switch from Copilot to Claude, all I need to do is tell Claude, here's my MCP server. That's really all I need to do. All the rest falls into place.
Okay, so this would get rid of the problem that I had, which is I tried making a straight JSON tool to interact with, I think, OpenAI. And that was a nightmare because I did not understand either the tool requirements and the AI. I even tried asking the AI for assistance, and it didn't understand its own tool requirements.
Yep.
And I just went in circles for hours trying to figure out how to actually talk to it to get the information that I wanted out of the database and into the AI and then back. So. An
Yep.
MCP would basically simplify that heavily, is what you're saying, I think, right?
It would absolutely. Fundamentally, though, and you've hit on one of the things that will determine success or failure in those endeavors is what one of them is pure guidance, right? Like, can I find the right guidance quickly enough for it to make sense on how to write these things? And if we think in terms of our FileMaker solutions, if there's something in our FileMaker solution that we want to expose to an AI application, right? Let's say a tool that can approve an invoice. Approving an invoice would probably be a script that exists in our FileMaker solution, right? Because a script is what we call deterministic. We've coded it in the exact same step-by-step set of instructions that are required to approve an invoice. We don't want an AI application to go into our FileMaker solution and figure out where the invoices are and then try to set a status to approved. That's not what we want the AI application to do. What we do want the AI application to do is, based on what the user is typing, if it's a chat, or based on where they are in the workflow, figure out if this is the time to call that script to approve an invoice. And then our script will take over and do the rest in exactly the way that we need it done. So
it does the step the script you can't code because you can't code if it feels if this looks correct enough, I should be approving it into a FileMaker.
Exactly. You could do it that way. I wouldn't do it that way, right? Because one of the true things about AI applications and specifically that interaction with the models, and we talked about this at length when we did the intro on all things AI. Models are fundamentally guessing at what needs to be done, right? Which is fine if you're just chatting with it and it has a hallucination and you catch it and you figure out like, well, yeah, that's not entirely true, and you tell it and it says, oh yes, I apologize, like it's very polite, or they are all very very polite, right? But when it comes to approving an invoice, you don't want it guessing, right? Either the invoice is ready to be approved or it is not, right? So when we describe under what circumstances and conditions the AI application could use our script, we as developers, and you touch basically on something that will, like I said, help drive that success or failure. We need to write enough instructions around that, enough guidance around that, so that the AI application uh, has the most chance of success in calling our script under the right circumstances. And that is not always as simple as it seems.
No.
Yep. All right. So through MCP, through that standard protocol that was introduced, and it was actually introduced. This stuff is barely a year old, right? Like it's not even a year old. The MCP got dropped by Anthropic when we were at Engage in Austin. So what are we talking about? March, February?
Yes, because you and Todd were just looking at, we were just saying that you guys were just looking at it when the current version of FileMaker dropped. And there were some questions like, what do you all think about MCP? And you guys are saying like, we're just looking into it because it's so new.
Yep.
So,
Yep. So this is brand new, right? So, but fundamentally, it solves that issue of I want to be able to hook up my AI application to any other system. What is a nice standard way of doing that, right? So this is the MCP logo, and this is their official infographic to say MCP sits in the middle as nothing more than a standard way of two things talking to each other. That's what protocol means, right? So on the left-hand side, you have different types of AI applications. On the right-hand side, you have different backend systems. And MCP basically makes it easy for the left-hand side to talk to the right-hand side. And that's how we got here, right? Like the MCP client is now pretty much baked into every AI application. There is not an AI application in the world that doesn't know how to speak MCP, so to speak, right? So that's the MCP client part of it. All AI applications know how to speak MCP, so they are MCP clients. The
okay.
MCP server is something that you have to either set up or you use something that somebody provides, like what Claris provides. You had a question on that, Margaret?
I was gonna say, so does FileMaker now understand MCP? Or rather, you can connect the two without minimal issue, or is it a complicated process to connect it to an MCP, to connect your database to an MCP server? Does that question
It,
make sense?
Yeah, the question makes a lot of sense, and we'll dive into that in detail tomorrow. Fundamentally, it is not a complicated process, right? So the mechanics of it, and actually, we still have 15 minutes. We'll get there. This is a little small. We'll get into that tomorrow as well. You can write your own MCP server, right? So Anthropic has a bunch of SDKs for different coding languages that you
Hmm.
can use to set up your own MCP server. There is no magic to an MCP server. An MCP server isn't like this heavy duty thing. It's actually pretty lightweight. Um, I've talked a lot about on this show and others about microservices, right? Think of an MCP server as nothing more than a microservice, because fundamentally that's what it is. Um, so we'll come back to that. So this is the Claris MCP server. So we've jumped ahead a step, right? So we sort of already hooked it up to one of our FileMaker solutions. And when you do that, it creates this kind of config file for you, or the config settings, which is, and this, Margaret, is what we talked about, right? How do you talk to an MCP server? It's just another URL,
Got it. Okay.
right? So just like talking to an AI model server, it's just another URL. I've said this a few times when we did the week long last year.
Hmm.
AI integrations are just like other API integrations. There's really very little magic to it. There's some magic, or it feels like magic, on how it works, but mechanically, to hook it all up, it's just like any other API fundamentally. Right? So all I need really is what URL do I need to be talking to, and what's my token here, right? Like that secret string. So when I do that and I go back to that LibreChat thing that I host myself, which is the chat experience, the web page.
Hmm.
Under the hood, there's a config file for that, right? So it's a LibreChat YAML file, and I just plop these things in there to say my FM solution would be the name of my MCP connection. There's a type. We'll get into types tomorrow. Here's the URL, and here's the authorization header with a static token.
Got it. Okay.
This is really as simple as it gets to make sure that when I'm in my chat application, now I can say, oh, by the way, use this MCP server. So that's what it looks like on the front end. In the back end, it was really as simple as giving it a URL, giving it an API key so that my MCP server knows that I'm allowed to talk to it, but that's it.
Okay. So then I would assume on the other side of the MCP server, you determine what actually goes through that URL.
Yes,
Got it.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you're so great at this because you're leading me straight into my next slide, right? Because this is what it looks like, right? If we simplify it, my AI application, which is the MCP client, can talk to an MCP server, and we don't need to worry about the protocol too much. If you want to see the protocol, I can show you the protocol and what some of these messages look like. So if there's enough interest, I can dive into that probably tomorrow. But these speak MCP, right? MCP is a language, it's a protocol. So they know how to speak that. The MCP server will talk to the FileMaker server through the existing APIs, right? So this is not a new way of interacting with your FileMaker data. It uses the APIs that we've known for many, many years. So that's how fundamentally in the back end it works, right? The MCP server knows how to use the APIs that exist on the FileMaker side. If this was ServiceNow, you would basically create your MCP server or that connection to ServiceNow through the ServiceNow APIs or the Confluence APIs or the Jira APIs, right? So it's basically the ability to reuse those APIs that already exist and now exposing them through a standard protocol back to the AI applications.
Okay, we have some questions real fast. I'm going to toss at you.
Yeah.
So MCP is like giving instructions to an AI workflows in its in natural language.
The natural language part is the input part of that. If we can picture that schematic of the AI application, the natural language thing is the input, right? That's the user typing stuff.
That's what you're
The-
telling the AI. Yeah.
yeah. What's happened in the AI application? The AI application will take that input, will basically make a call to the AI model to say, what do I do with this, right? The AI model. Um, we have 10 minutes left because we haven't touched the C and MCP, the context thing, right?
Oh.
The so we'll have to spend some time on that tomorrow. The answer to the question that was just asked lays in the notion of concept, right? Every chat experience that you have has what is known as a context window. Um, uh, your whole conversation is part of that context window, but also the tools that the MCP server exposed to the AI application. And the way that really works is that when I go back to, bear with me. I don't want to go too fast. Right here. When I'm in my chat experience and I do this, right? I select this. What really happens? What happens is my AI application is going to talk to my MCP server to basically say, give me the list of the tools that you have. And that's part of the protocol. It's a standard way of doing that, right? The MCP server will say, oh, I got 5 tools. Here are their names, their descriptions, all the information that you need to know, input parameters, that stuff that we talked about on how to interpret the result from calling a tool. All of that gets fed into the AI application and becomes part of that context window.
Okay, and then the AI would read the instructions attached to the tools and go like, well, this person asked about creating context, so I should go grab the create contact tool.
Yep, exactly. Spot on, right? Like based on everything that's in the context window, the AI application in interaction with the AI model will now go, well, this is not a question that the model should answer from its vast but stupid knowledge base. I should call this tool, right? So that comes from the instructions that are part of the context window.
Okay, got it. Hopefully that makes more sense. That makes more sense to me. Hopefully it makes more sense to other people and the person who asked the question.
So fundamentally, when we're done with that, can put a green check mark next to all of these, right? Because we can have tools that tell me what day it is or what the weather is, or make a call to my FileMaker solution to say do a no data search or run a script that shows me my open invoices, right? I said in the beginning that it's not just about your data, exposing your data to an AI application, right? Also your business logic, which is really your scripts, right? And we've used this example already a little bit. Um, we could create a tool that has the ability to run a script in FileMaker to approve an invoice, right? Depending on what the AI application or where the AI application is as part of its workflow. And how does that work? Well, fundamentally, uh, we as developers get to decide what tools we define, right? Because it's not because you hook up your FileMaker solution to an MCP server that all of a sudden everything in your FileMaker solution becomes fair game. That's not how it works, right? As developers, we have control over what data we expose, what scripts we expose, and we create tools around those, right? So I can create a tool called find invoices. I can create a tool called approve an invoice. And because we're talking the data API and OData API, those can run scripts, right? So a tool could be just go and run the script in FileMaker, right? And then the script results could become the outputs that the AI application receives to say it worked, it didn't work, or whatever. We can bring back data through a script as well, right? So your script result could be a bunch of formatted JSON that you then describe as, say, here's some JSON, this is what you can expect, these are the fields in my JSON. Oh, and by the way, the best way to show this is a data table, right? Something like that.
That makes sense.
All right, so that was a lot of technical stuff. Let's dive into a bit the stuff that you really need to know. It's important to know that, and we just talked about this, MCP is like less than a year old, right? So it's kind of hard to interpret where on this Gartner hype curve we are. It's we're clearly not at the plateau of productivity. I can tell you that, right? Like and I don't think we're at the trough of disillusionment quite yet, right? So we're in that first part. I don't know we're on the upslope or the downslope, but we're very much there on the inflated expectations. So be aware, right? So when you set out, you may have high hopes, and I'm not dissing MCP at all or anything AI, right? So I think AI is here to stay, and AI is going to be truly powerful in how we build solutions. But most of us are just struggling with the concept of what is it, where do I put it, how does it work, that kind of thing, right? So
What
that's
am I
why I
doing
wanted to
with
show
it?
you this stuff. All right, so tying some of the things together that we know, we talked about the model and how important the model is, because that's what is going to generate a lot of the responses. We know that MCP, in essence, is a protocol so that your AI application, through its built-in MCP client, can talk to an MCP server. And then we just briefly touched on context as the middle of that MCP, right? So model, context, protocol. So we touched on that a little bit, right? So model, protocol, we understand. Context is something that we need to dive in deeper. Get 5 minutes left. So if there's questions, Margaret, feel free to interrupt me and we can pick up from here tomorrow.
Hmm.
But context
There
is
was
so, go ahead.
no, there's questions, but they're not necessarily on topic. Like there were some earlier questions about RAG, for example. I don't know if you want to tackle that or if you would like to put a pin in that for maybe a later discussion.
No, I'm happy to tackle them because I don't want I don't want to start with this and then have to break it off. I'd rather start with this tomorrow then.
Okay, cool. Then let's talk about these then. Um, would RAG be useful to analyze subcontracts for a 12-month long project to query what is included in the language without having to read it entirely?
Yes, is the short answer, right? The uh, AI models are really good at finding patterns, doing summarization, that kind of thing, right? Like if you have lengthy contracts and you want to have a good summary and all of that good stuff, then having those in a RAG database is a good way to get that. There's a subtle difference here between, say, questions that need to summarize a bunch of stuff that's in a contract, and for instance, asking it, show me the contracts where this or that is mentioned, something like that, right? Because the latter is more like a semantic search, right? Because the found set is your list of contracts, whereas the first question, and that's sort of like what the question asker is asking about, is more like give me a good summary of that, and then potentially reference me the contracts that are there. But yes, RAG is a good way of doing that.
There you go.
And
And then
and
go ahead.
to expand on that just very, very briefly, the reason that things like contracts, long PDFs, are good for RAG is that they're unstructured. What I mean by that is if we look at our FileMaker databases, we have tables like contacts with a field for a first name, a last name, right? An email address, a phone number. Each has very distinct normalized pieces of data. That is called structured data, right? RAG doesn't work really well on that kind of structured data. You need unstructured data, like long verbose paragraphs, right? That kind of stuff. That's what RAG is really good at.
Interesting. Uh, Speaking of another RAG question, could RAG get information from a table to be dynamic?
To some extent, the reason why it's not going to be ideal is what I just mentioned, right? For instance, you can take any record in FileMaker and express it as just text, right? You could say you could make it verbose. You could say this record is for a person called Wim Decorte, and his email address is this and that, and he's got like 4 email addresses, and his phone number is there. He lives there, so you can make it like unstructured by making it verbose and then feeding it to RAG. That would work to some extent, but you're really disguising structured data and trying to make it unstructured. So it's not going to be really, really good at that.
There you go. And then this is an earlier question, which I think you have answered, but I'm always down to beat this particular dead horse. Um, MCP is like a special API, question mark.
And that's not a bad way to look at it. Yeah. The beauty of it is that you don't need to know how to talk MCP. All the AI applications out there in the world know how to do that, even the ones that you're going to write yourself. Because, as I mentioned, and I'll show you one tomorrow, um, the MCP is just an SDK. If you write your own code, you basically would grab the SDK and you'll let it figure out how to talk MCP. So while it is very similar to an API, I got some hidden slides in there somewhere.
Making you bust out the hidden slides?
Yep. I'd have to look them up. I have some hidden slides there that actually show calls that are being made and what they look like. And to what the caller was saying, they look exactly like API calls, right? It's really not that different. The only thing is, don't worry about it because you'll probably never write raw MCP calls yourself. You don't have to.
See, that'll be interesting. So I want to see what it looks like from the FileMaker side, how to hand the tools over to the MCP and then hooking it. I know you're going to do a presentation tomorrow, which will be really awesome, but it looked like you basically, once you give the URL to what, the AI side? Is that what when you did the URL, where you gave the URL over to Libre, you handed the URL and the token to the AI, right?
Yeah.
And then it immediately was able to pop up a little like drop down of like I have this set of available tools now, and that was the extent of the integration required on the AI side.
Yeah, pretty much because LibreChat, the AI application that I chose, has this built in, right?
Yeah.
I don't have to write code, and because it's standard, like that URL was the one for the Claris AI MCP, sorry, the Claris MCP server. It didn't matter if it was the Claris one or the one that I wrote myself because it's so standard. I can hook up, I can do that same thing in LibreChat for any MCP server, and it'll just work.
Okay, that's really nice. I assume pretty much all AI chats are going to be having this integration going forward for the most part.
Yes, if
Okay,
they pretty much all already do. Uh,
cool.
I'll look for those hidden slides and start tomorrow with showing those because I think it's maybe illuminating to see how exactly those work.
It's always good
Oh,
for
there we go.
visualization, I think. Oh,
Yep. All right. So fundamentally, this is how it works, right? So you make so pretend that this is the URL, which it is. SSE is the type there's three. There's only two. There's only one that matters these days. SSE is the old one already. It's already deprecated. But since the time I made my slides, streamable HTTP is the new one. But in essence, if you've never seen MCP and you look at this and you're somewhat familiar with API integrations, you go like, oh, this is exactly the same thing. You make a curl call to an URL, you get headers back, and you get a response back, right? Like it's or in this case, you're sending a JSON and you're receiving JSON. That's how MCP works. And the beauty of that is the format of this JSON and the format of the response JSON is known ahead of time. There's no guessing. That's what MCP delivers.
Could connect any workflow app to FileMaker if it has MCP.
Provided that the workflow app is an AI app that has a built-in MCP client. If the app can speak MCP, then the answer is absolutely yes.
There you go.
N8N is such a workflow tool, and it's a beautiful one.
Oh, yes, I hear that one talked about a lot. And then someone said MCP is like SQL, a standard way to interact with models rather than databases.
Yeah, that's not a bad analogy.
Cool. I think that kind of wraps up most of our questions, actually. So, oh wait, there was this one floating one. Claris has an AI server? Question mark.
They do?
You cover it pretty thoroughly in our week, right? Towards the end of that
Yeah.
week.
Yep. We've actually had one since FileMaker 2023. So FileMaker 20, that is. If you download the latest version of FileMaker Server, when you run the installer, you'll have a chance. Actually, is that now part of FileMaker 22? I'd have to check. Anyway, it's the same installer. You can install a Claris AI model server on your local hardware. Don't install it on your FileMaker server because that's. I am not going to be happy if you do so. Because it requires an amount of memory and GPUs that FileMaker server doesn't need. So you would never run an AI model server on your FileMaker server, but it's the same installer, right? You just install it on different machines.
Thank you, Wim, for the insights. Very good explanation. And then a lot of people saying +1 to that, which is yes. I understand this a lot better now.
My
And
pleasure.
you still haven't gotten to the C, right? So we have to figure out what the context is tomorrow. So that'll be fun.
Yeah. I'll start with that because that one is so critical, right? Because I mentioned success or failure, and that's going to be one big factor, right? Because if you ever wondered why you're doing vibe coding and you're chatting away and it does all the right things, and all of a sudden it goes off the rails and it starts but we already fixed that like 5 minutes ago. Why are you forgetting?
Yes.
Right? That is context. Like every AI model only has so much set of number of tokens, like size of text, if you will, that it can remember that is in the context. Once you get to the end of your context, it'll start forgetting.
Yes.
In essence, right?
This is hilariously what happened to me when I was actually trying to do tool calling for the first time, is that I would get it to fix some of my JSON once and it'd do one fix and I'd say, well, this is a different problem, and it'd fix a different problem, and then we'd circle back to fixing the first problem because I'd already forgotten
Yep.
all the issues. So yes, that'll be an interesting discussion. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'll show you how that works tomorrow, and I'll actually show you where you can see what context window you have with your model, because it's important in picking the right model, right? So you want to pick one that has an enormous context window, but those tend to be the bigger models, so they tend to require more hardware or be more expensive and all of that good stuff.
That'll be. I have not even heard this discussed really yet. I mean, it makes perfect sense when you say it. It seems kind of obvious, but I've not really heard like, oh, it's got a limited amount of memory, so you can only toss so much stuff at it before it forgets what you're talking about, and then you're back where you started. So.
And we talked briefly about when you expose tools, you have to describe the tools, right? You have to say, use this tool under these circumstances and give it these parameters and this. Like that's text, right? You're describing your tools. The more verbose you are in describing your tools, the smaller amount of context window you have left, right? And that's a real conundrum, because if you don't describe your tools well, the AI application will potentially pick the wrong tool at the wrong time, right? Like it's a very delicate balancing act.
Yes, I can see that. Okay, this will be a really fun discussion. Thank you, Mr. Wim. Thank you for staying over the extra 10 minutes to answer all the questions.
My pleasure.
So I look forward to having you back tomorrow so we can nag you some more for cool information on all this stuff.
I'll be here.
Excellent. All right, everybody, we will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.